Hello, 6th grade. Today we are going to look at explore patterns of data. Your objective for today is students will be able to describe data distributions by their shapes. So let's look at the spark you're learning. Cherise is collecting data on the length of crocodiles for a science project. She thinks it would help to make a poster for her class so the students can understand her data at a glance. How should she display her data? So American crocodiles, Australian freshwater crocodiles, and orco crocodiles. All right, so there are two ways that I think she could display this data. Is the first way she can complete a table, and then in that table she can put her crocodiles in order from least to greatest. So we're going to put crocodile here. So then this would be the American. Okay, and let's put them in order. So we would have 3, 4.5, 4.5, and 5.0. We're going to put this one as Australian, and that data would be 1.5, 2.0, 2.0, and 2.5. And then we have the rhinoco, and that would be 2.5, 2.5, 4.5, and 4.5. All right, so the other way is she could create a dot plot, and actually since we're using tenths here, it would be better to make my intervals tenths. .0, 3.5, 4.0, 4.5, and 5. And we can stop at 5 because that's as high as we go. All right, and so we can start here. So we have 1 at 3, we have 2 at 4 and 5 tenths, and 1 at 5. We have 1 at 1 and 5 tenths. We have 2 at 2, 1 at 2 and 5 tenths, and we have 2 more at 2 and 5 tenths, actually 2 at 4 and 5 tenths. Okay, so that would be the two ways that we could create that data. Okay, basically just trying to make it easier for people to see. All right, so let's build that understanding. Seeing data sets represented as dot plots and histograms can help you find and understand overall patterns in the data. Mr. Ortega surveyed one of his classes to determine the number of siblings each of these students has. The results are summarized in the dot plot. What conclusions can you draw from the distribution of the data? How many students did Mr. Ortega survey? So we need to count them, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. So 23 students. Okay? So it says a cluster, so this is a vocabulary word, is a group of data points that lie within a small interval. Does the dot plot have a cluster? If so, where? Well, I would say that this right here would represent that cluster. So we're going to say yes, and we're going to say between 0 and 3 siblings. S. Okay? Here's another vocabulary word. It talks about a gap. A gap is an interval that contains no data. So as you can see, right here and right here are our gaps. So it says, does the dot plot have any gaps or deviations? So once again, that would be yes. And we're going to say between 3 and 5, and 5 and 7, siblings. All right, another vocabulary word, a peak, is a data value with a higher, which is higher than the values on either side. Does it have a peak? Well, go back and look at it. I would say yes. This would be the peak. So yes. And then the peak is at one sibling. All right. Now, calculate the median of the data. How does it relate to the overall pattern? So if you remember from last section, the median is what is in the middle. So as you can see, it's going to be somewhere in between this one. So we could actually count it if we wanted to. And we could actually divide 23 by 2. So that would give me 11. So we could count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I think this one would be the middle. Let's try it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yep. So that right there would be the middle. Oh, you couldn't see that. So count 11, and then that would be the middle, and 11 on this side. Okay? So the median is at one sibling, which is also the what? The peak. Okay? All right. F. Draw two conclusions from the survey results. Explain whether you used a cluster, a gap, a peak, or a mode to reach each conclusion. All right. So we can say that most, so if we use the cluster, most people are between 3 to 0 siblings. Okay. We could also use a gap and say 2 of the 23 people came from a family larger than 5 siblings. Okay? Alright, so it says, suppose Mr. Ortigo surveys all his classes and summarized the number of siblings in the dot plots for each class. Would you expect the dots to look similar to the dot plot in task 1 with respect to clusters and gaps? I would say, since most of them and his one class clustered around here, I would say it would look the same or look similar. Okay? All right, moving on. Number 2, the histogram shows the fuel efficiency in miles per gallon or cars sold at Max's dealership. Is there a peak in the distribution? Yep, the peak is here. So that would be at 20 to 24 mpg. Okay, describe the pattern and how the data changes across the intervals. Well, as you can see, it's increasing to the peak. So increase to the peak, then decreases after the peak. Okay? All right. So we can also, it says, if you draw a vertical line through the middle of the interval, so if we drew a line here, the two sides of the histogram are close to mirror images. So the histogram is nearly symmetric. So that means that the data on one side and the data on the other are almost identical. Is the pattern in part B an indicator of symmetry? Does the data deviate from the overall pattern? So it's asking us two questions. Is the pattern in Part B an indicator of symmetry? We're going to say yes. If we fold the chart in half, the data on the left is almost identical to the right. Okay, and then it says, does the data deviate from the overall pattern? We're going to say no. And once again, almost identical. Okay? All right, so we are to check for understanding. So pause the video, work it out, and then come back and check. All right, welcome back. So it says in these two problems, we're going to just make some conclusions about that data. So as you can see, in one, this is what we call skewed, because it's not symmetrical. Most of our data is over here versus towards the middle, like this one. So this one is definitely symmetrical. All right, so we're going to talk about the cluster. We know there's a cluster between 0 and 3 pets. We know that it peaks at 1 pet. We know that there is a gap between 3 and 6 and 6 and 9 pets. And we know that it is not symmetrical. Okay, oh, can't see that. Sorry about that. All right, and then the second one, well, we've already had that discussion, that it is more symmetrical. Okay, there is a peak between 21 and 30 inches, but there are no gaps and really no clusters either. C-L-U-S-T-E-R-S, clusters. Okay, and we could say that the most common snowfall is between 21 and 30. We can even say, yeah, between 21 and 30, we'll call that. Okay? All right, and that is it. All right, you guys are going to work on your own. Not very long today, just 3, 4, and 5. So you should be able to do that in a reasonable time. Have a great day.